Welcome to Happiness, Health and Relationships podcast. If you're looking for inspiration on powerful, healthy habits, you've come to the right place. I'm Angeline and I've been working with people for over 10 years in therapy. And this podcast will cut through the myths and misinformation on healthy lifestyle. I'll be interviewing experts in their field, providing top tips and motivation for 6 elements of living medicine. The 6 elements are reducing stress, exercise and fitness, nutrition, sleep, reducing addictive substances, and how to master healthy relationships. Let's get started. I'm really looking forward to our podcast today. We've got Mel Harrowsmith here, and Mel is a personal coach, a life coach, and she's also a purposeful life coach. So I'm really looking forward to getting into her insights and a little bit about her story on how she came about to do this work, and a little bit about the challenges that she's faced along the way and anything in between, really. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation, something that I think we all aspire to live a purposeful life. So, yeah, welcome, Mel.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak on your podcast.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. What is a purposeful life?
Well, I think one of the things that makes that quite an interesting question is that there is no standard answer to that. Because what gives me purpose might not give you purpose, might not give the next person purpose. And likewise, so we've all got individual purposes, sense of purposes, if we've found what they are yet. And we know that some people are struggling out there and have lost their sense of purpose. So I think really, instead of thinking about it in terms of defining what specifically is a life with purpose, it's more about what does it feel like. And that will be common between everybody, no matter what you're doing. So it doesn't matter whether your sense of purpose is flying to the moon or whether your sense of purpose is looking after your family. The feeling will be very similar. So that's the kind of thing really that we're looking for. And when we think about a purposeful life, it really is about how that is making us feel and how we then bring that forward into the world and into our lives.
Absolutely. So that sounds easier said than done, because I'm thinking, we've got all these bombarded with all these messages where we're taught to work, really. We're not taught to take care of ourselves. I know that some people will feel selfish for thinking about, what they want, what they really want, because they're too busy thinking about how it might affect other people or what other people are going to think of them. So straight away I'm thinking that actually this journey could be quite difficult for lots of people in navigating those conflicting feelings, really. So I think that's really helpful to start to think about how we feel, really.
Yeah. And I think you've hit on some of the key things there already about, hinting there at putting other people first, and that assumption that, if we think about ourselves, we're being selfish, which is just such an unhealthy attitude, and yet so many of us have it. It comes from somewhere, and there is a general perception that putting ourselves first is selfish, and I just don't subscribe to that. And I think this is where some of the challenges are. So you said there that at the beginning, this sounds like it could be quite difficult, and I think one of the biggest difficulties for people when they potentially realise that something's wrong, and then they haven't lost they've lost their sense of purpose, or they just know that something's wrong and they haven't quite worked out what it is that's wrong, is that culturally, isn't the case across all cultures, but certainly in our experience where we are, culturally, we're not encouraged to take the time to just sit and think about ourselves. We're thrown into a culture that says if you think about yourself, you're selfish, you need to put others first. So we end up in a situation where there's a lot of people-pleasing going on, a lot of self-negative talk, if we even consider thinking about what we want and, actually doing something about that, because the little selfish voices come in. So giving ourselves the time and space to sit and pause and think about what we really want is really, really important. And it's okay to do that. And we give ourselves such a hard time, most of it inside our own heads. There's a battleground going on inside our own heads. So most of it's going on in there. We give ourselves a really hard time. And then if we do, thankfully, take that opportunity to sit and think, because we're not in a culture where that's encouraged, we don't know how to do it.
It's shocking. It's shocking how we speak to ourselves, isn't it, really? We speak to ourselves in a way, and I know that this comes up on the other podcasts that I'm recording, that the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine that we touch on and we're going to be going into more detail on these podcasts. It's relevant to all 6 pillars, really, because all of it's based on living medicine, and so all of those aspects really require us to start to take care of ourselves a bit better, really. So I think that's so important what you're saying, that how we speak to ourselves, how we allow ourselves the time to really think about, what's important for us. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting there that you bring up those 6 pillars, because I know that's something that, you're really passionate about, and we'll probably talk about that on a future podcast, your passions and your purpose. But I know that you're interested in the 6 pillars and how that, interweaves with all aspects of life. And I think in the context of looking for purpose, if I remember these correctly, the 6 pillars, we've got managing stress, nutrition and eating healthily, exercise, moving around, physical activity, so that's 3, minimizing harmful substances, sleep, that's it, right. So if we think about all of those 6 things, and most people out there listening and think, well, we need to manage stress, and we know we're supposed to eat healthily, and we know we need to move daily, and we know we need to sleep properly, but we're not necessarily doing a great job of that. And there's a whole raft of reasons and that might be the case. But if we think about that in the context of life with purpose, if any of those are out of line, then it is going to affect your ability to pursue your life with purpose. So if you're stressed and you've got stress hormones raging around your body, especially if this is quite chronic and has been going on for a long time, you can't process cognitively and rationally. You cannot process if your emotions are running high, because they just hijack your system. So if you're stressed and you're feeling emotional and all of that is going in the body, it's highly likely you're not going to have the clarity of thought to think about what your purpose is, never mind move towards it. If you're eating poorly, that is a form of stress on the body. So likewise, that can trigger emotions and hormones and all sorts of other things that hijack your body. And it can also do interesting things. So I'll give you a personal example related directly to nutrition. So back in, I think it was August, I decided to do a detox and completely cut out sugar, which I think is a we could put that in the harmful substances bracket. So I completely cut out sugar, and my God, I felt absolutely amazing. All sorts of funny little things that were going on that I was just tolerating. I hadn't realised it was related to sugar. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel like I had a hangover, but I hadn't been drinking alcohol. Cut the sugar out, all of that stopped. Loads of energy, full of beans. I thought, great, amazing, I'm never eating sugar again. And then my birthday happened in September. I was like, well, you've got to have a piece of cake on your birthday. I mean, you can't not. So then the slippery slope started and the sugar started to come in here again. And I can feel it. And I'll sit down to do things that I really want to do and I'm passionate about because it's related to coaching and this is my purpose. This is what I want to do. And I don't have the enthusiasm. It's like wading through treacle. I've got brain fog, and that's to do with the food that I'm putting into my body. So that then, if we think about that over a long period of time, it's just going to erode my enthusiasm for the stuff that I love doing. Likewise, sleep. We're not getting enough sleep. We're too tired and our bodies are too busy trying to keep us going rather than giving us the capacity to think about our life with purpose. Harmful substances, I think we can probably all guess how that that's going to potentially affect us physically, mentally, completely distract us from looking for a sense of purpose. And then healthy relationships. So this one's quite interesting because I think there's two. So there's the people around us, and then there's ourselves. So if we think about the people around us, if we have unhealthy relationships with the people around us, it doesn't mean it's going to be impossible to find your purpose and move towards it, but it can be incredibly difficult because either consciously or subconsciously, those unhealthy relationships will put blockers in the way, potentially manipulate you, steer you off course, shift you to where they want you to be, not where you want to be, keep you under control, whatever it might be, but it will block you from moving forward. And that can be an incredibly difficult place to get out of if you are entirely surrounded by unhealthy relationships. The plus side of that, of course, is if you've got healthy relationships, wonderful. You've got cheerleaders, you've got support, you've got people you can turn to who are going to help you through. That's all fantastic. But I think what's even more important is the relationship you have with yourself. And if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, that is going to be the biggest blocker to move forward to finding life with purpose. And that doesn't mean that you've got to be some person who's got it all sorted, some guru who knows what all the answers are before you can find it. I don't subscribe to that either, because that's not me. And I've got, I feel like I've got a strong sense of purpose. But I think we do need to have much more conscious awareness of who we are and what the blockers are. So it was back to that voice we were talking about earlier. What is that voice saying to us? And how much of that is actually true? And how much of it is just utter nonsense negativity that we need to get out as fast as we possibly can so that we can move forward healthily?
I'm just interrupting this episode just for a few short moments to let you know that I've got a page where you can leave me a voice message. I want to make these podcasts as interactive as possible, and wherever I can, include you, my brilliant listeners, into these episodes. So head over to speakpipe.com/Angeline and go ahead and leave me a message. It could be a question, it could be a review. You might even want to let me know what you'd like to hear on the upcoming episodes. Whatever it is, please drop me a message, and we might even include your message in upcoming episodes. I'll endeavour to answer all the questions, but I can't guarantee that I'll get to all of them, but I'll certainly give it a good go. Anyway, let's get back to it. Yeah, I liked what you were saying there, because I was thinking of us as energetic beings, and when you were talking, our relationships have such a huge impact on us and our environment in general, really. So if we've got negative influences, they zap our energy. They completely wipe us out. Whereas if we've got those positive people around us, then we are far more likely to have then that capacity, that headspace, if you like, to think about what's really important for us and all the things that we need to do to try and quieten the noise, all the external noise that's going on around us, really. And I liked what you were saying earlier, because there was a sense of an individual theme to this as well, that finding out what our purpose is, what's one of the first things that we can do to start our own journey in identifying? Because people say, what's a purposeful life? What's your purpose? And lots of people don't know. So I guess I'm wondering, where can people make a start?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that can help if you're right at the beginning and feeling completely lost. I think the first thing to do is be kind to yourself. As we've already said, we're not used to this. We're not in the habit, or the vast majority of us are not in the habit of sitting down, thinking about it, self-reflecting and being okay with that. So if you're in this situation where you think something's not right, I'm not really sure what it is, and that in itself can feel really overwhelming, is if you can, just take a deep breath. Calm down. It's okay. And it's all right to feel like that. And in some ways it's a blessing, because if you've recognised that you feel like that, now you can do something about it. And that's brilliant. That's a great starting point. So then I think there's a few things. So really start to tune into how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis and what's affecting how you feel. And you might start to get a sense of what's working for you and what isn't. So if you're, so let's think about, practical things, physical things that we can do, because this can be a bit easy to visualize and imagine. So if we think about some of the tasks we do on a daily basis, right from your first cup of tea in the morning, making breakfast, taking the kids to school, walking the dog, getting to work, reading your emails, going to the meeting, giving the presentation, going to school, whatever it might be, all of these activities, try and tune into how you feel about them. How do you feel about them before they happen? How do you feel about them while you're doing them? And if you really love the activity, then it's going to feel great. Your shoulders will probably drop. You will subconsciously potentially rise up. Your body will sort of be bigger. You'll stand taller. You'll be calmer. You'll enjoy it. You might feel happy, content. And that's a really positive feeling to lock onto when you're looking for purpose. If it's something you hate doing, it's like, oh my God, do I have to do this again? That feeling is also really important to recognize. So, your shoulders might roll in, you might hunch down, you might feel anxiety in your stomach or nervousness, tension. You just might feel like you want to run away or hide under the duvet. And that's the opposite end of the spectrum. So if you can start tuning into those two feelings, it starts to act as a bit of a litmus test for things that align with who you are and things that really don't. And then you can start using that as a bit of a compass to help you say, okay, do you know what? I really don't like this. Why am I doing it? And start to think about that. And, do you know what? I really love this. Absolutely love this. What is it about this that I really love? And it can start giving you clues about what might bring you more purpose. So that's one exercise. The other thing to think about is your values. So who are you at your core? What are the core fundamental values that you are living your life by? And even this, people are like, no idea, because we've never sat down and thought about it before or never had a conversation. So when people start to do this, we tend to bounce around a lot. So you can have an exercise where in a session, I might give you a sheet of paper and there's about 80 values on there. And you go through and you choose all the ones that resonate with you. And then we whittle it down and talk about, okay, is that a value or is that a need or is that a want? And really whittle it down till you've got probably between 3 and 5. Any more than 5, you've probably got a couple of needs and wants stuck in there. And then when we know what our values are, so values might be things like integrity, fairness, justice. There's a whole raft. So let's take those 3. So integrity, fairness, and justice, which are quite similar. But if those are your core values, if you then start looking at, again, your day-to-day life, say, okay, where is my day-to-day life aligning with my values? And where it's aligning, you probably feel pretty good. And where it's not aligning, you probably feel pretty crap. Or frustration, because you're not, something's happening, or this fundamentally is grating against my core values. And that you'll feel that in your body. It will feel uncomfortable. And once you've got an idea of what your values are, then you can start looking at where it's resonating with you. And that, again, might start giving you a sense of purpose. So, if your values are being fulfilled at work, you might be very, very happy in your job, and your work might be your sense of purpose. You might hate work. You might find it an absolute nightmare for a whole host of reasons. But when you come home, there's things at home that resonate with your values. And that feels really great, a wonderful place to be. So then we'd pick into those and start looking at what is it about those things that are feeding your values, and then how can you get more value in your life, and how can your life bring more, to resonate more with your core values, so that you feel like you've got more purpose and feel much more content.
I'm thinking as well that these are questions that only we can answer. That's the beauty of this, isn't it? And part of that process of quietening down the external shoulds and shouldn'ts of, what are people going to think about me if I do that? Or how is that going to impact somebody else? Or, which, fair enough, we do need to consider others. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but usually if it's us living out or wanting to go towards our purpose, then that's usually not harmful to anybody else anyway. So I was thinking, and a question I really like to ask is, what would my 70 or 80-year-old self be advising me on this one? Because that really helps me gain a perspective that it gets some distance between the things that don't really matter, the things that I might be worrying about, or, all that chatter, like I say. And you were saying earlier how we speak to ourselves as well. That's going to be feeding into it. And some people don't feel deserving. That might be a subconscious thought that stands in people's way as well, doesn't it? If people don't really feel deserving. So that's what was standing out for me when you were talking there, was that these are answers only we can answer. Getting quiet, getting some space away from the busyness of life, I was hearing there, is one of the things that's necessary through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even that, I think, I said at the start, even the thought of just taking some time out for ourselves can be absolutely terrifying for some people, because they don't feel they're worth it. And they spend so much time thinking everybody else is worth more than they are, that on a subconscious level, maybe an unconscious level, they're thinking, oh, I can't do that, I'm not worth that. Why on earth would I give time to myself? And then if they do manage to snap out of that, wonderful, but then don't know what to do. And that's where sometimes people might need some support and some help. And that might come from family, it might come from friends, or it might come from somebody who's completely emotionally neutral, which again can be beneficial. So, they might come to somebody like you, Angeline, or they might come to somebody like me. And hopefully that will help them move forwards. And you're right, the answers are in all of us. We all have the answers. You might be sat there thinking, well, if I had the answers, wouldn't I be doing it already? But we're very, 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 very clever and brilliant at hiding what is good for us from ourselves. It's an amazing quirk of being a human being that we have these answers within us, and then we just hide them.
Yeah, we're just so conditioned, aren't we? And you touched on it earlier, that it's cultural. I feel like we almost need a movement in 2025, a culture shift, because we are getting ill. People are getting ill from the lifestyles that we're living. And so we're talking about assertive communication and boundaries as well there, aren't we? Saying no to people, it's a huge one. Saying no to people, that is such a common thing that people really struggle with. And that keeps us from our purpose.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. While ever we're saying yes to everybody else, we're not saying yes to ourselves, because we haven't got the capacity, because we're too busy trying to sort everybody else out. But again, it loops back round to that. We don't have the self-worth. We don't think we're worthy of saying, actually, yes, I want to do that for me. No, I'm not going to do that for you, because I need this time to do this for me. So yeah, boundaries is a huge one, and that's been repeatedly coming up. I don't know if it's just confirmation bias because I've been working on it, so I'm seeing it everywhere, or if it does happen to be just, coming up more and more frequently. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people who don't know how to have healthy boundaries and are frightened to have healthy boundaries. So a lot of people with rigid boundaries, and a lot of people with porous boundaries or flaky boundaries, however you want to call them, and not that many with healthy boundaries across the board. Most people will probably have a mix. They might be healthy in some situations and not healthy in others. But yeah, not many people that, well, they wouldn't be coming to coaching, to be fair, if they'd got all of this sorted. But so it's not surprising that people coming for coaching don't necessarily have healthy boundaries across the board. And that's something I struggled with, for a long time, without really realising that's what was going on.
Fear of not being liked, that's a big one, isn't it? Or if we do ask what feels like too much for ourselves, then we're going to be rejected. The other person's not going to like us. I'm thinking as well, perfectionists can sometimes struggle, because life is just a whole focus on performing. smashing it at work, smashing it at whatever. And so there's a fear of letting your foot off the gas, because if you were to do that, then we're sure to fail. We're going to be a failure if we're not pushing ourselves at 100 miles an hour. So there's lots of barriers to this, isn't there? Because like you say, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's actually not so easy. You kind of got to go through a process first of overcoming those fears sometimes and getting through the noise of what's expected of us. And I think that once we start to put boundaries in as well, if we're somebody that struggles to say no, those around us will kind of go, oh, hang on, what's happening here? I don't like this. You don't usually say no. And so people come up against resistance because the people around them aren't used to it. They're not used to them starting to grow a stronger sense of self, really.
Yeah, and that can be really difficult, but particularly for people who are learning to put healthy boundaries in, and then they move towards putting one in and somebody pushes against it. That can be really quite unsettling for people practicing and, trying to learn to do this. And, there's a tendency to go, oh, I can't do this. You've really got to stick at them. You've really got to keep them in place. So I think with boundaries work, with people who have been really struggling, always start small. Start with something that seems, and I don't like really using the word seem, but seems safe to try so that it's manageable. Because, if you've got people who've got really unhealthy boundaries, there can be some big issues that they need to tackle. And trying to go and put a new boundary in that situation from the off could be quite damaging, because it might not work. And then you're back to square one. So try and encourage people to build up.
That's a really good point, isn't it? To check that it is safe, because we don't know people's individual circumstances. So again, relationships are going to come into it there, aren't they? Where if people can find the odd one or two even person that they feel they can trust, that they can talk to, then those relationships are going to really come to play here. Because we need people in our corner through this process, don't we? For sure.
Yeah, and that comes back then to the the healthy relationships around us, doesn't it? And if you've got them, it's a great support network. If you haven't, it just makes everything harder.
So we were touching on inner wisdom, if you want to call it that, or inner being. We've heard about it called many different things. Some people are spiritual, so they might call it their spirit, but whatever version of that we were touching on earlier, in order to, because that's a big question, isn't it? How do we connect with that? So, and you were saying, I think, that to create space, time out, a bit of quiet on our own, whether it be a walk in nature or doing something where it feels recharging in some way, and something that's individual to you, really, where you can get that sense of peace, more peace. Mindfulness, we're going to be covering mindfulness on the podcast. These tools are really good to sort of get into that space. And then, like you say, start asking those questions that only we can answer, the things that are important to us. Asking, what do we want to be remembered by as well, I think is a good question. Or what do we want to be appreciated for, that kind of thing. Or what do we appreciate in others? I think that sometimes gives us some insight as to what our values are, you were touching on earlier. So, just little, because we want small steps, don't we? Sometimes it feels a long way away and out of reach, this kind of stuff. And in some ways it is, because of our conditioning, we were touching on that we have to kind of get through the mire, wade through the mire, in order to get to this quiet space. Yeah, that's what I was hearing through what you were saying there, that kind of chip away at it approach almost, and be easier on ourselves.
Yeah, and I think another thing to be aware of, if you're at the start of this journey where you're thinking, oh my goodness, something's got to change. I'm not feeling fulfilled. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm bored. I'm lackluster. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Got no idea what I'm doing. All those kind of things. The thought of trying to do something about it can be really scary. It's really scary. I know, I've been there myself. Having done quite a lot of work, let's rephrase that. Having done a lot of work to get myself to a better place, to find a life with purpose. And then, I've still got stuff to deal with. We're living in the world that we're living with. There's always going to be stuff to deal with. So I'm by no means, at the end of that journey.
And that's it for another episode of Happiness, Health and Relationships podcast. If you'd like to find out more ways that you can work with me, then head over to happinesshealthrelationshipspodcast.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.